So, hey folks, this is me, Vishwas Nair. I'm the host of the show. And, a lot of times we realize that, .NET is something that we need to learn and explore because it has evolved over a course of time. And trust me, Microsoft has delivered a lot of features inside it. Like, you name it, it's there in .NET. That's how it is. And the way in which the community is developing, the way in which people are coming out and perceiving this form factor of code is something that I had never imagined. Like you might be a Pythonist, but once you learn C sharp and enter the .NET infrastructure, you're for sure to say that .NET is the future. And I think thanks to Swaminathan sir,
Mhm.
it's that automation that we all care about. In an organization, you want to win the solutions. You need the solutions right on time. That is where automation comes into the picture. DevOps is a sexy looking Linux command. It's all about automating all these processes, and I think GitHub Actions is one among them. Thanks to GitHub and the Microsoft, which is coming up with huge amount of uh, extensions in the marketplace, and so many things are coming up. And I think Swami sir, thanks for being on the show. Means a lot when
Mhm.
we are learning .NET.
Hey, hi Vishwas. Thank you so much for having me. And you can call me Swami. I'm not a star or anyone. So I'm just yet another developer learning on a daily basis
Sure,
on a lot of
Swami.
technology things. So yeah, call me
Sure,
Swami.
sure.
That'd be great.
Sure, like let's just start with before the session goes on and things like that. It's all
Mhm.
technical. Like, let me just start with your journey. I know you take care of .NET Bangalore as well, so
Mhm.
it's a community that you have been part of. But I wanted to
Yeah.
understand like what was your journey as a .NET developer and how did you fell in love with this .NET technology?
Okay. I might need to then go back in the history, right? My journey with .NET started back in 2005 or 2006 when I was in my college second year. So me and my friends were looking at learning something new, and then we had two options back then: either to learn .NET or Java. So for some reasons, I somehow I was fascinated towards the word .NET. So that okay, maybe I'll go ahead and learn .NET, right? And then I kind of joined an external training institute, and then I kind of started with .NET. Way back it was like .NET 1.1 with Visual Studio 2003, and just when 2005 got launched, Visual Studio 2005 got launched, and then the institute themselves were they are upgrading to .NET 2.0, and then they were trying to teach us 2.0. And that's how it started. And fortunately, when I joined work after college, also I was put into a .NET project, and that was on .NET 3.5 back then. And then I got to work on a lot of those latest technologies back then, like WCF and WPF, were one of the most popular ones in .NET to write front-end applications, and WCF used to be used for writing the SOAP-based web services and things like that. So building such large-scale applications in the healthcare domain and things like that, that kind of caught my attention more towards .NET, and then I started liking it more, and as I started using more towards it, right? And then in 2016 or so, when most of my community, basically I started being part of communities since 2012. It's close to 10 years now. And from 2016 is when I started giving talks on different topics, and .NET was always one of the important ones, one of the interesting ones as well, because that's something which I've been using since the start of my career, right? Close to 10 plus years I've been using .NET. And yeah, and also when .NET became open source, it became a lot more easier, and then it's become a lot more available for everyone, right? Earlier it used to be only like .NET means it's only for Windows guys, right? Now it doesn't matter, you can run anywhere .NET, it be it on Linux or Mac OS or Windows, it doesn't matter. Or even you can also run it on a Raspberry Pi, and you can also run like on mobile apps, right? You can also build mobile apps with .NET using .NET Maui. And even taking it further, if you want to do machine learning also, you can do that with ML.NET, and then you can also write Jupyter notebooks with .NET or C sharp, right? So it's again it's evolving in a much rapid pace, and that's when I kind of continue to learn myself in the .NET as well, right? Having said all of that, right? In my day-to-day job, I currently don't really work on .NET, like because I moved more towards architecture and the DevOps and the cloud engineering side of things. So I focus more on creating these CI/CD pipelines, and then bringing in DevOps practices, working on cloud native solutions, and working on Kubernetes and Azure and things like that. But still, my passion towards .NET is continuing. So in all my talks with even with respect to DevOps practices and everything, I kind of use .NET as an programming language in the tool.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think yeah, we can start with the session. I think I'll start sharing the screen. I'll
Sure.
start sharing the screen right now. Add to the stream. Yeah, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Vishwas, for having me again. And thank you so much, audience, for joining in on a Saturday evening. I know it takes a lot of mental strength to come and join on a technical session on a Saturday evening. You could very well book on a movie and then go there, but you chose to join us. So thank you so much. You guys are the motivation for us to do more of these sessions. Right. So with that note, we'll get started with the session. So today we are going to talk about how we can accelerate .NET deployments to Azure with GitHub Actions. All right. So before we get started with the session, a quick intro about myself. So my name is Swami. Swaminathan Vetri is the full name, and you can call me Swami. And I work as an architect at Merce Technology Center in Bangalore. I'm also a Microsoft MVP under Developer Technologies Division since 2016. And I'm also a member of .NET Foundation. And that's my Twitter handle, @SV Swaminathan. And I do write blogs at swaminathanvetri.in. And I also have an YouTube channel. You can follow me there. Swaminathan Vetri is the name there. And if you want to follow me on GitHub, you can again go and search for me at @SV Swaminathan. So apart from these tech stuffs, I also like photography, blogging, and then traveling, like going on road trips with family, with friends, etc. And also I am interested towards a bit of home automation, bringing in like smart bulbs and then smart gardening and things like that. I also built a small little bit of automation around watering the plants in my house. So I also have a blog post on that. You can also take a look at that. All right. So with that introduction, let's get into the agenda of today's session, right? So today what we're going to talk about is let's understand what are GitHub Actions, and then why do we really need GitHub Actions? And if you want to use GitHub Actions, what are some of the core concepts we are going to use? And then let's go with the demo, right? So what are GitHub Actions, right? Simply put, it is to automate your workflow from idea to production, right? So if you have an idea of doing anything, then if you want to take it to the production, you can think of different elements that comes into picture, right? From the time you take your ideation phase to the production phase, you can think of a lot of different phases like code reviews. One of the things, if you start writing codes, right, you can very well do a code reviews. And if you want to automate some of those processes, you can use GitHub Actions there. Or branch management, if you want to follow a different kind of branching strategies, and then if you want to handle what kind of branches to be created for new repositories, or what kind of branch policies to be put, etc., you can also very well do that with GitHub Actions. And even the repo management, like I said, if you want to create a new repo. So for example, if you're working in a bigger enterprises, typically you would want to have repos of the same nature, right? So every repo of your solution should be of the same, should have the same set of collaborators, same set of policies, and same set of branching permissions, etc., etc. All those things you can automate using GitHub Actions. And issue triaging. Let's say if you're running an open source project, and then if you want to triage the issues, whatever the people create or your contributors create, it will be a lot easier to do with the GitHub Actions. So for example, you have your source code and you also have your documentation, also have your infrastructure, and all in the same repository, right? And whenever anyone creates an issue on different folders in your repository, you'll be able to triage them easily, whether it's an issue towards your documentation, or it's an issue towards your actual features, or it's also issue on the infrastructure automation, or it's an issue created on your tests or whatever. It makes it a lot easier for us to triage those things. And of course, CI/CD is one of the important aspects for the developer community, right? So because you can very much enable continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines using GitHub Actions, and which is what is going to be the core in this session. I'm not going to touch too much on the repo management or branch management or anything like that, because those are more of the general DevOps principles. If you're interested, we can very well have another session around that. But today's session is going to be more focused on if you're a .NET developer, and if you have a .NET workload, how do you set up a CI pipeline for that workload, and how are you going to set up a CD pipeline so that you can deploy that particular workload into Azure? That's what we're going to see today. And of course, a lot more things also can be done with GitHub Actions. But then now we already have a lot of such automation tools, right? So then why do we really need to use GitHub Actions, right? So first thing is GitHub Actions is completely cross-platform. It can run on Linux, Mac OS, Windows, ARM, and containers. Right? It's not specific to any operating system or so. And you have something called matrix builds. So that means you can basically set up certain parameters as a matrix, and then your builds can run automatically on multiple versions. So for example, if you are a .NET developer, if you're a .NET library developer in specifically, right? So you might need to ensure your library works on multiple versions of .NET, right? So currently the LTS version is .NET 6.0. The prior to that was .NET 5, and then the prior to this was .NET 3.x. And now .NET 7 is already on preview. So how do you ensure, as and when new .NET framework version or .NET core versions come up, how do you ensure your library is going to be compatible in all those, right? So for that, if you want, you might need to do is you need to run your build across these different versions of .NET, right? So I might need to target .NET 3.x, I might need to target .NET 4.x or 5.x, 6.x, etc., right? So all of this you can put it in a matrix, and then you will be able to run them. I'm going to show a demo of this. That time it will become more clear. right? And also it is possible for it, you can run builds of any language. Though in this session I'm going to talk about .NET because that's the background from where I come in, but irrespective of any language, like whether you are a Java developer or if you are a Python developer or a Node.js developer, you should be able to use GitHub Actions to perform any of the things, basically the entire CI/CD pipelines and everything. And of course, as a build runs, you can very well see the live logs. It's not that you need to wait for the build to complete and then you have to export the log somewhere and then look at it or so. So you get live logs as and when the builds are running. And handling secrets and everything is a lot easier with GitHub Actions. So it comes up with a built-in secret store. So secrets means, like, for example, if you want to deploy your .NET maybe web API is one of the REST endpoints, right? The REST APIs. If you want to deploy your .NET REST API into Azure App Service, you would need to have Azure App Service published profiles and then the connectivity to Azure, etc. Right? Those are something called secrets. So to store those secrets, you don't need any external secret provider like Azure Key Vaults or any other third-party vaults. You can very well add them into the repository itself as a secret, and then you'll be able to refer them in your workflow, and then we should be able to get the job done. So, and also if you want to do a multi-container testing of your applications, you can very well do that, because all these are running on hosted agents and hosted runners. So you get an option to run your tests on multiple containers and everything. You can do the orchestration, everything within the GitHub Actions itself, and then you should be able to get that working. And of course it is open source. All of these actions are built in open source, and there are a lot of community powered workflows are also available. So you don't have to really go and create a custom workflow or a custom action for yourself. You think about most commonly used action, you'll be able to find it in the community, basically in the marketplace, right? So GitHub Actions has a marketplace. You can go and search for some of these actions, and then you should be able to find it from there. There's a good amount of community backing and then support for GitHub Actions. Yeah, now talking about the core concepts, right? So I would like you to go from bottom to the top, right? So at the bottom of, or at the most important unit of work in the GitHub Actions is an action or a task, right? An action is nothing but let's say if you want to run a small shell command or a shell script, right? Telling if you want to run a hello world, that could be one of an action, right? Or if you want to do if you want to run a .NET command like .NET build, that's going to be one of the actions. Or if you want to do an deployment into Azure, deploy to web app, that could be one of the actions, right? That's the smallest executable unit what you get in GitHub Actions, right? And then multiple actions comprise a step. So a step could be something like an build is one of the steps, right? As part of the build, you might need to run multiple things, right? So first thing, you could start with pulling the source code. That's like a checkout. And then you might need to set up the environment, like whether it's a .NET build, means which version of .NET you want to use. If it's a Node.js, which version of Node.js you want to use in that particular pipeline, etc. Right? That is the next step. And then the third action could be, it could be like .NET build is what you might need to run, and then you can do a .NET test to run your .NET unit test, and then you can run an code coverage to run an code coverage. Yeah, and you can add more such tasks as such, right? So all of these would form a step, right? And then after the steps, multiple steps would comprise a job, right? So like I said, each one is one of the steps, and one step could have multiple actions, and multiple steps will form a job. So one job could be build, could be one of the job, and then deploy could be another job, and then maybe publish artifacts could be another job. So all of these would be the different jobs, right? And when you define multiple jobs within a workflow, that it means by default they are going to run in parallel unless we define a dependency between the jobs. We will also see how we are going to define the dependencies, but at the moment you can think of that the jobs are something which are meant to be running in parallel, right? And there are definitely different ways to pass the values between one job to other job, and then setting up dependencies between the jobs and things like that, right? Now multiple jobs would comprise a workflow, right? A workflow is nothing but starting from building and deploying could be two jobs, and then the build could have multiple steps, and each step could have multiple actions inside it, right? So and this entire thing is called a workflow. Maybe it's called a CI/CD workflow for a .NET application, right? And this entire workflow is what is run by a runner. The runner is a hosted agent, if I can talk in terms of Azure Devops world, right? It is a hosted runner. That's where you are going to run your entire workflow, and when that workflow runs, it's going to execute multiple jobs, and when the job executes, it's going to execute multiple steps, and each of these steps will have different actions, right? That's how you can visualize the entire GitHub Actions as a workflow. So now this is one set of concepts, right? And then what are the some more concepts what we need to be aware of are events, right? So on what basis a specific workflow should get triggered? That is what is called an event. The event could be push. That means whenever you're pushing a code to a repository, or whenever you're creating a pull request, or whenever you are closing a pull request, or whenever you are maybe deleting a pull request or whatever, right? So those are some of the events on pull request. Or whenever a new issue is created, if you are creating an issue triaging kind of a workflow, you will use these issues as an event, right? And whenever a release is created, if you want to publish a release notes to somewhere, maybe to your GitHub pages or wherever, right, you could use that release as an event. Along with these, you can also use scheduled events. So basically, if you want to do some sort of an a scan, security scans or anything on a scheduled basis, then that's also possible. You can set up some cron triggers, and then you should be able to, run the workflow in those specific schedules, right? Those are the events which is going to trigger the workflow, right? And then when the workflow completes, it definitely generates a lot of artifacts, right? The artifacts could be, let's say, if you're building a .NET .NET application, you might get a DLL, right? That's one of the artifacts that gets generated, right? Or if you're running a unit test, you will get test results and then the code coverage also. Or if you're running in functional test, or if you're running in functional test with Selenium, you can also generate some screenshots, etc., right? So these are the different artifacts that gets generated out of your build, right? Or build or a pipeline, right? So these are all related to the workflow, and then what triggers a workflow, and then what an workflow produces an output, right? Now moving ahead with the runners, right? There are two different kinds of runners. So one is called cloud hosted runners. That means GitHub provisions these runners automatically for us, so we don't have to maintain any of the hardware or software or wherever it is. We just need to specify in which version of the OS I need to run this. Is it going to be on Windows, or is it going to be on Linux, or is it going to be on Mac OS, right? And then GitHub automatically provisions it. So basically, in that sense, you will not have control over in which machine it is going to run. You'll just have control over in which operating system version it is going to run, right? But if you're not very much comfortable with that, and if you're in a situation where you need to have full control over the entire hardware and the software in which your actions are going to run, right, that is when you would use something called self-hosted runners. So that means it could be as simple as your laptop. You can attach it as a self-hosted runner in GitHub, and then you will be able to basically, when you trigger a new pipeline, then that particular build or the build job would run against your machine. Or if you make it always, if you want to have this self-hosted runners always on, you can provision a cloud VM with whatever the configurations you want, with all the softwares and with all the special softwares or the libraries, the tools, whatever you want installed in that machine, and then you can attach that into GitHub as a self-hosted runner, so that all the builds can be pushed against that. So yeah, next thing is I'm going to talk about. Okay. Yeah, I see some questions. I'm just taking a side look. Yeah, maybe before I go to the demo, I'll take a pass and then I'll take a look at the questions. Right. So most often I've been getting these questions in all the previous sessions when I did around the GitHub Actions, right? Because quite a few people, at least coming from the enterprise background, are very much aware of Azure DevOps, right? So if you want to compare the Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions, how does it look like? Right, I try to put some of the concepts on the left hand side, like what it is called in Azure, and then the first column is what it is called in Azure DevOps. The second column talks about what it is called in GitHub Action and how you do it in GitHub Action, right? So for example, in if event triggers are the important ones. It's on what basis I need to trigger a pipeline, right? So if you want to define that in Azure DevOps, you will use something called trigger as a YAML element there, and then you will define what is a trigger. Is it a push or a pull or a PR or whatever, right? But here it's called on. You'll just say on push or on pull request is what you will use in GitHub Action, right? And then in from terminology perspective, whatever the cloud-based build agents are called hosted agents in Azure DevOps, and it's called runners in GitHub Action. And BIO is nothing but bring your own agents. If you are doing that, it's called self-hosted agents in Azure DevOps. It's called self-hosted runners in GitHub Actions. It's more for people coming from Azure DevOps background to relate how they can relate GitHub Actions with Azure DevOps and what are the similarities and what are the differences there, right? And if you want to define any variables within your Azure DevOps pipeline, you'll use a section called variables, and that's where you're going to define these variables and its values. In here, it's called env. Sorry, I think there's a typo there. It's not envq, it's just env. And then if you want to store any secrets, or if you want to access any secrets in your Azure DevOps build, you'll use something called variable. You can either use variable groups or Azure Key Vault. There's a concept of variable groups within Azure DevOps where you can go and put the variable there, and then you can add it as mark it as a secret, so that it's available and accessible only for the administrators or whoever is the owner of that particular variable, right? Here, like I said, we have a built-in secret store in GitHub Action, so you can go and put it at the secret store. You can have the secret store can be maintained at multiple levels. You can have an organization level secret store, or you can also have an repository level secrets, or within a repository also you can also have environment specific secrets. So we're going to see environment specific and repo specific secrets in the demo part. The org level secrets I'm not going to show now, right? An example, if you are using something like a mono repository, that means where you will have in a single repository multiple different components involved. It could be your documentation, or it could be your code, so actual source code, or it could be your infrastructure code, or it could be your testing project, etc. Right? All of these could be part of the same repository, and you might want to run different CI steps for each of these check-ins. Let's say whenever a repository file is checked in, you might need to run a different workflow file, and that workflow need not be run for a code check-in, right? To do that is where we use something called path filters. So in Azure DevOps, if you want to define a path filter, you will use include and exclude tags, and then you need to specify the paths. But here it's called paths. It's as simple as paths, and then paths ignore. So to include anything, you'll use something called paths, and then if you want to ignore some of the changes, you'll use something called paths ignore, right? And jobs are also a common concept between Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. So in in Azure DevOps, if you want to make a dependency, if you want to set a dependency between two jobs, you'll use something like depends on. Let's say I have something called build job, and then I'm doing a deploy job. And if the deploy job is depend, we'll say deploy, and then you will say depends on. Maybe you'll give the job name as a build job, right? But here you'll just say needs. That means this deploy job needs a build job, right? And then manually triggering of the pipelines. So in Azure DevOps, once you have that Azure pipeline YAML file, you'll go to your Azure DevOps, and then you can always go ahead and rerun the workflow, or you can run the files, right? But here you need to add a specific YAML tag called workflow dispatch. Only then you will be able to manually trigger your GitHub action. Otherwise, it will always be only like CI enabled, right? And let's say if you want to create a reusable pipeline components. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're working in a solution which is having a microservice architecture, right? That means there could be multiple microservices in principle, right? There will be multiple microservices in place, each one doing its own activities, right? And you would want to have a consistent CI/CD pipeline steps for each of these pipelines, right? To achieve that, what you use is something called templates in Azure DevOps. That means you create a template which will have all these steps. Let's say I want to do a checkout, and then do an .NET build, .NET test, and then .NET whatever the code coverage, and then run and Sonar Cube scans, etc. Right? This could be 5 steps which I want to run across all the microservices. Then what you could do is you'll get something called a template, and then you will reuse these templates across these different Azure DevOps pipelines. Okay, so the same thing if you want to do it in GitHub Actions, you can use something called reusable workflows. There's something called workflow on and workflow call. So you will use a reusable workflow, and then you define all these tasks or the action. It's called action. The actions inside that workflow, and then you would need to use this. You need to call this workflow from wherever you want to invoke this, right? And if you want to pass any parameters as an input when you manually trigger, or as an input to template, etc., you use something called parameters in Azure DevOps. And in GitHub Actions, it's called inputs and outputs. So input is what you will pass it as an input, and any task or any action output can be taken as an not an action. Any steps output can be taken as an outputs directly. Okay, and if you want to execute certain conditional steps, you use something called conditions, and then you define a condition there with dash equal to and things like that. Here use something a simple if condition. And there are many more such similarities and minor differences are there. I just try to list down the high level and the most frequently used ones here, right? So with that basic idea and the concepts, let's get into the demo, right? So before I go into demo, let me quickly check if there are any questions. Okay, so Manoj is asking how to approach learning .NET. Okay, that's a very good question. Uh, yeah, so you can go to actually .NET is should be the first place for you to go and get started. I hope you are able to see the screen still. So if you go and say .NET, right, that is going to open the .NET's this one. This should be your first page to go and look into .NET. There are a good amount of documentation available here. If you want to go look at the different things, what you want to do, or what you can do with .NET, and then the corresponding documentation, you can very well go from here. As you can see, you can use .NET on the cloud, on the data, on the IoT, machine learning, and native desktop and mobile, and then using web. You can do all of these different things in web, right? So this should be a good starting point for you. And if you go to learn, you have a lot of these learn modules are also available. So you can also very well do it on the in the browser itself. You don't really need to install any software or anything. You can also learn .NET on the browser directly. So this should be a good starting point for you to get started. And this is learn to code, and you can go to learn module as well. See, all of these different modules are there. Depending on what kind of workload you want to learn, you can go and click one of them. Let's say if I want to learn web, right? So this is how it is. You can build your Blazor app directly in the browser itself. If you say let's get started, I think this is a module which does on the machine, but there are also learn modules on the browser itself, right? So basically, yeah, this should be your starting point. And then if you want to still understand why .NET and all those stuff, you can also learn from here, right? And if you have any other specific questions on specific portions of .NET or anything like that, we could also very well discuss that separately. Yeah. See, I think, yeah, this is what is in browser tutorial. This is a cool stuff. So you can directly go ahead and start writing the commands and things like that from here, and then you should be able to understand what's happening and etc. Yeah.
I think yeah, Nish also takes care of one more .NET/architecture.
Correct. Yeah. So this is the basic one, right? So under, if you go to .NET, you have this architecture thing. That's where all of these architectural documents and all of these guides are there. That's a little more advanced. So let's say if you're really new to .NET, go ahead and do those basics first, and then you can come and look at these specific documentation in the books. Right? If you want to build microservices in .NET, so this is a book for you to go ahead and read about. Right. And similarly, if you want to use ASP.NET related apps related ones, you can go ahead and take a look at this, etc. Okay, so that's about .NET. And okay, can you help me on SQL? Okay, that we can take it up later. Maybe at the end of the session, maybe you can ask a specific question on what is your problem with the SQL. We could do that. And another question: what are the things I should do in my first year? That's an interesting question. Basics, fundamentals, right? We can't stress enough. So you'll have to get your fundamentals right, right? So start learning. Don't worry about high level things on what is .NET and things. So those are the secondary things. So get your algorithmic skills, data structures and things like that properly, set that foundation properly, and then you can start learning these different languages. Yeah. So
Yeah.
foundation and the fundamentals are very important. Once you have that proper understanding of it, you can pick up any language easily, right? Let's say, for example, if you get your OOPS concept properly, and then you should be able to appreciate how C# works or how Java works or how other programming language works, right? It should be much easier for you. So yeah, so I'll say initially focus more on your basics, get all the things correct, and then you can very well start learning more on these high level stuffs.
Yeah, like you just go back to this documentation and see they've also started with the basics, like the C
Yeah,
sharp basics. Then they go on with a lot of things. Like whatever
yeah.
you're seeing is probably the extension of all the concepts in C, but in a very, very fashionable fashion. It was Visual J plus plus, right? Before the C sharp. Then they named it C sharp.
Yeah,
So
C
yeah,
sharp was always there. Yeah, I mean, it used to be called C, yeah, plus plus, and then the name was changed, like the logo was changed to C sharp like this. Yeah,
yeah. I think
yeah.
Shreya is asking why Node.js in a single thread. Like Shreya, good that you're in Infotech forum of first year practice code. Okay, fine, to enjoy. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
single Node.js
Why
threaded.
Node.js is Node.js single threader? Okay, that's a good question. So maybe I'll park it for later time. All right, let's discuss about .NET for a while, and then maybe I'll get
Yeah,
to
sure, sure.
Node.js part towards the end. Yeah. So yeah, hang on till the end, and then we could discuss further on that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. Maybe let's get started with the demo, right? So first things first, how do we get started with the GitHub Actions, right? So as usual, you can just go ahead and search for GitHub Actions documentation, right? And then you will get this. So my recommendation is always go and read the documentation, irrespective of how many other videos and other things you see. Documentations are the that have the first-hand information, right? So even after watching this video, also you can still go ahead and read the documentation to understand some of the things. And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to the speakers and whoever is in your sphere of influence, right? So yeah, so you can very well go ahead and start from this. So GitHub Actions, this is the homepage of GitHub Actions documentation, and from here also you can diverge to multiple places. Right, how you can learn GitHub Actions and what are different examples and what is continuous integration and how do you do packaging, monitoring, blah blah blah. Everything is properly captured here. Right, this should be your first starting point. And if in case, I think I also have created a repository. Where is my other browser window? Okay, that's here. So whatever the demo I'm going to show here, so it's going to be in this repository. I'll ping this link here, so you guys can follow this repository so that you can go ahead and take a look at it on what is being shown here. Okay. So maybe you can help in pushing this into the comment section, Vishwas. Okay. I pinged it into in the StreamYard, so you can push it there. So yeah, so you can keep a watch on this repository. So this is where we are going to push the code into this, and then we are going to see how GitHub Actions are going to be working today, right? And I've created some steps for the demo. So this is what we're going to do today, right? So first, let's get started with GitHub Actions. How do we get started with GitHub Actions is what we're going to show, and then we're going to see a walkthrough of documentation. I think this is what I just did, right? And then let's start with setting up environment variables and secrets, and then setting up the CA workflow for .NET application. And then we'll also see how we can set up a manual invocation workflow, and then we'll understand how we can set up a matrix strategy for .NET application. And after that, once the CA part is all clear for us, then we'll get into CD, which is nothing but continuous deployments, right? We'll set it up. We'll set up a CD to deploy to Azure, and then let's see how we can set up pull request based conditions for feature branches and etc. And we'll also look at how we can set up environments and what are the how we can use environments and the branch protections and environments to protect your production branches, etc. Right? And we'll also set up some deployment to like an mock production environment, right? After this, we'll see how the entire thing works together. We're modifying the code and then see how fast we're able to get the code into production, right? That's all. First things first, and then I'm also going to show how we can quickly create these actions directly from the Azure portal, and then finally we'll also see how we can create the actions for an Blazor kind of an application, right? So that's the kind of agenda what I have. That's a lot of demos what you're going to show. So yeah, hang on, and feel free to ask your questions, and if there are anything not understandable or anything like that, please interrupt. Maybe Vishwas would help to interrupt me, and then I can take more time to explain some of these aspects. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So basically, yeah, this is a repository which we are going to use today, where we are going to set up the GitHub Actions, right? So I don't have any actions, as you can see. The Actions tab is where we will go ahead and get started with the GitHub Actions, right? So I don't have any actions here, so there is nothing which is showing. It automatically understands it and it says get started with GitHub Actions, right? So there are a lot of pre-made, actually pre-built workflows available, which we can directly reuse if we want to, or we can start from basics as well, right? As you can see, it also understood what is my current repository, and then it says a suggestion, right? So it says suggested for this repository, a .NET build and test a .NET ASP.NET Core project or .NET desktop project. And then if I want to do a deployment, I can use some of these readily available workflows, right? These are best ways to get started instead of starting from scratch, right? And these are the other automations which I was talking about, like labeler could be something on the who whenever a pull request is created, you can label whether it is a documentation related pull request or it is an infra pull request or whatever, right? So all those things you can do from this. Yeah, so as a scope of this particular session and the demo, we're going to do an CI for .NET. So we can go ahead and explore this .NET 1, right? So yeah, so prior to doing this, I'll also quickly explain this particular repository structure. So what I did is I kind of created 3 different .NET workloads. So one is library demo. That's nothing but an .NET library. That's a simple class library is what I have. So I just have one method that is going to say hello and it's going to say hello with the message whenever it is invoked, right? So the library is nothing but an reusable component. So it can generates a DLL, and then this can be used in some other project like an REST API, or it could be used in another Blazor WASM application or wherever, and then that can be that can be reused basically. And this library can be pushed into NuGet. That's a default package manager which generally people use to publish their reusable libraries to the public, right? So we're not going to publish this library into NuGet, obviously, because this is not that mature yet, right? So I'm just going to show some of these basic concepts of CI pipelines with this library demo. And then what we'll extend from there is we'll also you have a web API, right? So I'll also show what are these different web API and how the code looks like and everything. Right? There's a web API. Web API is nothing but a REST endpoint. It's just exposing one controller, which is called weather forecast. And then when you hit that controller, you're going to get some weather details here. That's all. So this web API is what we are going to deploy into Azure App Service. Azure App Service is another PaaS service where you can deploy some of these web applications, like be it a REST API or be it an Azure function or be it an whatever your static web apps or whatever. You can put any of these website content there. The website, it can host .NET applications, Java applications, Node.js applications, Python applications, etc. So in this demo, we are going to see how we are going to push a .NET application into an Azure App Service, right? And then in the end, like I said, the Blazor code is what we are going to use for the Blazor WASM demo or the Azure Static Web Apps demo. Right? When we get there, I'll talk about what is static web apps, why it is different from Azure App Service, and then why can we use static web apps for Blazor, etc., etc. Right? So that's about the folder structures here. I'll also quickly walk you through. Share the code. Right? It's the same thing cloned in my local repository. So just for this one, I'm gonna do and pull to ensure I have the latest one. Yeah. So let's quickly run through this. So I'll say, oops, wrong button is clicked. Open an integrated terminal. So I'm going to say .NET build, right? That is going to build your .NET application, and then I'm going to say .NET run. That is to run your .NET web API now, right? So what it is doing, it is now hosting this web API in this link, which is localhost colon 7022. So you will get this. So don't worry. On your development, you have something called Swagger available. So just type /Swagger. Then it opens up this Swagger documentation. Swagger is nothing but an API documentation. So this is what you will share with your consumers to know what are the different endpoints available in this particular API, and then what are its parameters and what are the request response and everything, right? So this is a simple controller that doesn't take any parameter. That's why it says no parameters, and it is going to give a response with 200 whenever it's executed. So I'm going to execute this now. So when I say this, yeah, this is what it gives. It gives some 5 different, weather conditions with different climate and things like that, right? So if I do once again, it's going to give a different set of outputs for me. So basically, our web API is in a working condition. That is the first thing you need to ensure before you push your code into a GitHub or any kind of source control, right? So now our library is all working fine. So I'm going back to my VS Code and I'm going to stop this, right? So on the same lines, I want to show you quickly what that Blazor application is. So open an integrated terminal, and then I'm going to say .NET run. Yeah, so now this is hosted here. So this is a new application, so you kind of get this. So this entire application is written on .NET. As you can see, it's a client-side application, like a single-page application. So all the interactions are happening at the client side, and everything is via .NET, and there are no single line of JavaScript code written in this, right? So that's what this Blazor is for. So this is another Blazor application, which is what we are going to deploy it into a static web app, right? So those are the small demo applications. The intent in this presentation or the session is more to understand how GitHub Actions can be used to set up CI and the CD. So we're not going to look into details of different aspects of .NET or other things like that. That's why I kind of kept it at the bare minimum code, whatever that comes out of the template. Right? All these are something which I just generated by using the template. So if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, to create a new .NET application, so you could pretty much do this, right? Demo. So basically, you'll just say .NET new, and then you can just do a list. So these are the different templates which we can use, right? Like gRPC, Web API, Razor, MVC, Angular, different types of templates are available with which you can easily create your .NET application. So what I did is this the demo. Okay, so I just said .NET new Web API, and then I went to the Web API demo folder, and then I created this so that I got this Web API. Okay, just to save some time, I created these projects, and then I also pushed them into GitHub so that we can focus on the next steps, what is needed or what we can do from whenever the code is ready in the repository, right? All right. I hope that gave a fair context on what we are going to use, and then what are the different kinds of workloads. Workloads, I mean, this Blazor is one of the workload. Web API is one type of project that's called a .NET workload, and this is like a libraries and their workload. Okay. Right. So now let's go ahead and get started with our setting up the pipelines, right? So first thing is, yeah, let's go ahead and set up the basic CI pipeline. So I'm going to go to actions, and then we are going to say configure, and maybe build .NET library is the name of the YAML I'm going to give here. So build .NET library, and this name also I can change, build .NET library. So here is where I told the event. So line number 3. This is what is an event, right? I hope it's visible. So yeah, so here is where this is what is an event name. Like if you recollect the picture what I showed, there's an event, right? It's called on. This is a trigger on whenever we're going to run this workflow. On push to which branch, that's what you're specifying here. To on when push to master branch is when we are going to run this workflow, or when there's a pull request that's created to branch master is when we are going to run this workflow, right? And when this workflow run, what are things it's going to do? That's what is defined the jobs here, right? you will define something called jobs, and this is the name. The name of the job is build, right? You can give any name there. I'm just going to leave the default name. So, and where is it going to run? This workflow is going to run in an Ubuntu machine. That's why it's called Ubuntu latest here, right? And what are the steps it's going to run here? So these are the steps in this particular job. So first thing, it is going to use an action called checkout v3. So this is how basically we will use other actions, right? This is an action which is available in the marketplace, right? So if you want to look at the actions marketplace, you can also look at here, right? The right hand side, what you see are the different suggestions based on the current project what we're working on. So you can also search for different things here. Let's say the setup, I'll search for .NET here, right? Then you can get a lot of these different options. Let's say .NET Sonar, Sonar Scanner, and then .NET Format, Build .NET Effective. These are the community powered, .NET actions available here, right? Or if you click on this link, I think it will go to the marketplace, or maybe okay, it's not. So maybe I'll have to go into the marketplace. So you can go to Actions Marketplace, and you can understand what are the different actions which are present there, right? So if you want, let's say if you're starting afresh and if you want to know what are the different actions available, you can go ahead and search for this. I'll say .NET again here. It's going to tell me all these different ones, right? And there would be some more things which are like what to say, verified actions. That means they are like from secured, and then they all pass all the checks and other things. Other things are also from individuals, so you can also look at what is the action and then whether it is from the right person and things like that. Then you can, based on your best judgment, you can choose the action whichever you need, right? And when you can also browse by the categories here. Let's say I choose continuous integration. Is it for container CI? Then these are the three different ones that can be used. Or if it's on the game CI, you can use any of these. I don't think anything is on the game CI. So I'll remove that .NET thing, and then if you see in the games, you can use all of these different kind of actions are there, right? So marketplace is a good place for you to go and search for different actions, and then what is available, what is not, and things like that, and then you can choose what you want to use, right? The easiest way, like I showed, is go into the actions tab in the repository where you are, and then you can start from there, so that it also gives an featured actions and things like that. So all these ticked ones, like by actions, are the verified ones which are completely safe to use, so you don't have to think twice. You can very well go ahead and use it. And the other ones you can just do look at the open source repository folder, and see who is author, and then what kind of how are they maintained, and then whether it is latest or if it's maintaining with an is it up to date and things like that. You can take a look at those, and then you can choose which action you want to use, right? Yeah. So now if you want to use any of the action, this is what you will do. Action slash checkout is what is something which would be there. I think that should be there here as well. If I say checkout, right, you can click on this, and then it also shows what is the version of it, and then see it says 2.4.3, right? And what we're using is checkout at v3. So you can also go ahead and change v3.0, and this is how we will use it. So name checkout, and then use as action slash checkout with whatever the things if we want to use, right? If you want to add anything else, we can very well do those as well here. But it's a basic one we are using, so it just does this. If in case you want to add any new action, so just put the cursor wherever you are, and then you can click on this small icon here, which is for copy. It is copied, and then you just come here and then just do a paste. You'll get the entire snippet there, and then you can start modifying as per your need. Okay, so it's much easier to go ahead and get started with the actions. So yeah, so I'm good with this action. And then what we're next doing is setting up .NET. And here it says .NET version as 5. So let me take a look at my project to see what is its .NET version. I believe I created with .NET 6 if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it says .NET 6.0. So that means I need to run to 6, right? So I'm gonna change this to 5.6.0.x to 6.0.x. And then what we are trying to do is restoring the dependencies by using .NET Restore. And then we are going to do a build, .NET build. We are setting the flag as no restore because we just did that restoration. So it's going to directly do a build. And then it is also going to run an .NET test. So in this project, I don't have a test. So I'm going to remove this step for brevity's sake. And also, if you look at it, it directly does .NET Restore, right? So where it will operate is it works on the parent folder. Whenever this workflow is run, it will look for a .NET project, like or any .cs project in this particular folder, and that is where it is going to do a .NET build. So now we don't have this .NET project at that folder location, right? Because where you have is this. Let's say if this is a parent folder, in the parent folder we don't have any CS project. Our project is present in that library demo folder, right? So that means we need to ensure we have to go inside this folder and set that as a path, right? That's when we are going to introduce something called environments, right? I'm going to say environment, and then I can say the value cannot be null. Okay. So maybe I'll just say library path, right? That path could be dot slash library demo. This is my library path basically. Right, here is where I want to I have my basically the project, right? So here we need to go and use that. So now how do we use this? This is a variable, and this is called as an environment variable. That means this is going to be available throughout the execution of this particular for this particular workflow, and this will be available across all the jobs if you push it on top. Right, so now I'm going to use this. So .NET restore, and then I will say a dollar. So this is how you will define a library path. You need to encapsulate within single quotes. So you just say environment dot library path, right? Inside this path, what is the project name? The project name is library demo dash cs proj, right? So I'm going to copy that name just to ensure I don't make any mistakes. So library.cs proj, right? This is what we are going to do, and the same thing is what we need to give it in the build step as well. Build no restore, and then I'm going to save this, right? And one other thing we need to do now. So if you look at it in by the nature of this particular repository, I have multiple folders here, right? Like library demo, blazor demo, web API demo, and it wouldn't be appropriate to run this workflow for building this library if I'm making any change into the web API demo folder, right? Or if I'm making changes into blazor demo folder, it doesn't make sense to run the library demo build, right? So what we need to do is we need to ensure we give that path as well, right? That's where we use something called path here, and then say what happened paths. Yeah, okay, that's an intelligence which is present there, right? And then I'll say, oh no, I think it's going to be, yeah, paths, and the path is going to be what, library dash demo slash star star. That means anytime there's a push that's happening into this library demo folder is when I need to run this, right? The same thing for my pull request as well. Oops, I need to take the paths as well. You might not need to give this if you are having your application at a root folder directly. Okay, whenever if you are having this kind of a single repository with multiple folders inside it is when you need to do this. Right, so now I think we should be good. So we are saying whenever there's a push that's happening into the master branch and in this path library demo, and is when we are going to run this. And this is my library demo paths path, and this is what I'm going. These are steps I'm going to run when I whenever this workflow trigger gets triggered, right? So yeah, so we are good here, and then we are gonna do a commit directly. So I say added .NET build workflow file, right? So I'm going to commit directly into master branch for the sake of the demo. Usually you need to get a PR pull request, and then you need to get that merged. I'll also show that in a while. For now, let's quickly get this added. And if you now go and look into the actions, you should see the build.NET library, right? But that is not triggered yet. The reason being, we have just put it as whenever there's a code change that is going to happen into the library demo folder is when this is going to trigger, right? So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm inside this library demo. I'll go. There's only one class here. It says hello message. Maybe I'll just add a quick comment telling this method is used to print a message, right? And then I'm going to save this, and now it should show that as a change here, right? This is a new comment which I added, and then I am going to state this added for methods. That is what we did, right? And then I'm going to sync the change. And it says okay. And as soon as this change is synced into the remote repository, we should see the particular action getting triggered, right? Okay, it failed. That's a good start for the demo. Startup failure. Okay, why? What is the problem now? Okay, the workflow is invalid. Unexpected symbol. Library path slash library demo position in video library. Okay, I think I made a mistake. I get that now. That's good. So we learn from the mistakes, right? So what I did is, see, only this part is my environment variable, right? But I kind of combined everything inside the environment variable. You couldn't find that environment variable. That's why it failed. So we're going to edit that, and then I need to close this thing here for the environment variable. I believe that should work. Okay, so env.library, library path. Okay, and then we are doing a library demo.cs branch. Hopefully this should work. Let's check. But our trigger worked properly, right? Because we have given these conditions under library demo folder, that the trigger was able to trigger it. But because we had other typo issues here, the job didn't run. Let's see, fixed the project path. Okay, commit here. And now I don't think this would run because we've not committed anything into that folder, right? So that is where, let's say, if you want to speed up this process, and if you want to do this manually, if you want to trigger this, right, that's when you will enable the manual trigger. So to do that, it's another simple line. So I'm going to edit this workflow file again. So here in the on condition, you have something called workflow. So you can also use intelligence here. When you press control and spacebar, it triggers this. Right? You need to add this called workflow dispatch, and that's all. So if you just add this one liner, it is going to enable you to trigger it manually. And if in case when you want to trigger manually, if you want to give any inputs, is when you'll use this inputs. So in our case, we are not going to use that. So I'm going to delete that fully. Right. And yeah, so we'll add this as well so that we'll be able to quickly trigger this. So added manual trigger, right? I'm going to commit this. And once you commit this, now if you go to GitHub Actions and then build .NET library, you should see this workflow as a workflow dispatch event trigger. That means we can run the workflow. So I'm going to say run workflow. And now that should trigger the workflow, right? But all see, this is what it has run. It says clearly that it's manually run, right? If you go to actions and build. Yeah, so this was by the commit. This is what is a CA commit which triggered this particular run, and this is a manual run. That is what is shown here. So this is what the live logs is. So this is a summary page. You can click on this individual build, and then it shows up the logs here. I think by the time I open itself, it's almost done. Right, so set up .NET with .NET 6.x 6.0, and then it is also restoring dependencies. As you can see, this is what it has done, and then it is also it did the .NET build, and then we finished it, right? That's how we can quickly set up an CI pipeline. I think that's a good first step, right? And it took whatever the time it took. It just shows that 25 seconds, and where it took what time, etc. is also it is all shown here. So you can see each and every step took whatever the seconds is all clearly captured here. Yeah, you can also download the logs and everything from here. If you want to look at the view raw logs, you can go there, and then you can you'll get this entire log. This log is what is neatly represented there inside the inside the window here. Okay, so that's about setting up the basic CI pipeline for an application, right? And what we also learned, just as a quick summary, is we kind of created the first workflow file, and in that workflow we understood how we can add specific path filters, and then we also understood how we can add a manual trigger condition, and then how we can use environment variables, right? All of these things is what we kind of accomplished now, right? Secrets is something which we have not done yet. I'll get to that part next. Okay, so otherwise, yeah, this is a good first step. So now I talked about something called matrix builds, right? That means with a single build you can run multiple things. The same build can be run in multiple configurations. Okay, so let's do that for the library demo. So for that, I might need to downgrade my library. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this from .NET 6 to .NET 5, and then .NET 5 doesn't use this implicit using, so I need to remove this as well. Okay, so I'm gonna do this .NET 5.0 change. Okay, actually I shouldn't have done that. Let me quickly do one thing. We revert this and pull the latest in my machine first, because I've been making some changes in the GitHub directly, right? So typically you would do everything from your code just for simplicity, and then to make it fast, I'm doing direct code check-ins in the GitHub portal itself. Okay, so yeah, these are changes which we've made, right? All of them are available here with workflow dispatch, and then all the conditions and blah blah blah. Everything's available here, right? So now what we want to do is we are going to enable a matrix one. So for that we need to make a couple of changes. So let me explain those changes as well. And, just a second. This might have come up. Yeah. So this is my. Okay, so one thing is we are going to downgrade our this one, so that we can set up the build for both .NET 5.2 and 6.2 as well. Okay, and this is not a feature in 5.0, so I'm going to remove that. Right, this is a code change, right? And then we also need to make some changes to our workflow. Only then it will run as an matrix, right? So for that, what we need to do is, let's say in the build step, right, we have something called runs on. Under this we can add a strategy. Okay, as you can see, even Visual Studio Code also has some of this intelligence, so I think it gives a different one. I'm going to say matrix, and then I'm going to say .NET version, right? I'm going to specify a .NET version in an array. I want to test this for 5.0.x, and then I also want to test this for 6.0.x, right? And I can also specify a name for this strategy, right? That would be something like running .NET build on version. And then again, to reference any variables, you will use something like this: matrix dot .NET version. So this is how you will define a matrix. Basically, you are telling matrix is nothing but like an array you can think of, right? I'm gonna tell that the .NET version is this one, 5.0.x and 5.6.0.x, right? That is first change. And the next steps, what we are doing here is in the setup, we've directly outright put the .NET version as 6.0.x, right? So here also we need to change this into this one. So matrix .NET version is what we are going to add here. Right, so and then we should be good. So now what we're trying to tell is tell GitHub Actions is, hey, run this particular workflow in two different versions of .NET, so that I'll know whether my code is going to work on both of them, right? That's what we are trying to do here. So now I am going to commit these two changes as enabled matrix strategy. Okay, I'm going to select all of them and commit them and sync the changes. All right, so once it's synced, we should see build running in our this one, obviously. Where is my demo? Yeah, okay. I'm going to the actions and build .NET library. Yeah, so you can see enable matrix strategy triggered. So now, as you can see, it already started two jobs, right? We didn't define two jobs specifically because we enabled matrix. It is able to understand that it needs to run this particular job twice, and that's how it is able to run this. I think I made a mistake, so it is again failing. What is that? Oh yeah, I got the problem. Okay, I think this should run here. What happened here? File scope namespace is not available in 9.0. Okay, excellent. That's good. So let's go ahead and fix the code. That's the power of CA. The moment you miss it, it will just going to tell you. I should have done an .NET build here, which I didn't do in my local C. It's already showing the error here, right? So the thing is, in this is a recent change in .NET or in C#, right? In the namespace, you don't have to provide these braces and all. It's called and scope namespaces, right? Or inline namespaces. So since we downgraded it into 5, we have to change this. You have to add this in the older way of how we used to do, like create a namespace and then provide these or encapsulate this within an these flower brackets. So I think now it should be good. So just to be doubly sure, I'm gonna open terminal and then do a .NET build. But I don't want to keep on taking the build, right? Okay, now I think it is good. So let's go ahead and fix it as well. So fixed build errors. Okay, this is a change, and yeah, sync the changes. Hopefully now this should fix the build. Let's go ahead and see that. Actions, build .NET library. Yeah, it's already showing up. And yeah, so you can choose one of the jobs, whichever you want to watch, and then you can look at the things here. See, as you can see here, like the setup .NET here would do and setup for .NET 5.x. Obviously 5.x is kind of unsupported, so it's showing that error. So you should be on 6.x already, but just for demo I'm just simulating this part, right? Yeah, so there we go, it's already done. As we speak, it is able to complete these two jobs in parallel, right? So that's how you can set up these matrix builds. So this is going to be very helpful in multiple scenarios. What I showed here with .NET is like making as a library author, how you can leverage this. If you're on Node.js also, for example, you can also check how in which versions of your Node.js your app is working, or if you are if you're building a cross-platform application, you can check whether it is working on an Android build is working, or iOS build is working, or any other cross-platform builds are working or not, right? You can very well do all of those in the matrix with the matrix strategies. Or even for that matter, if you want to ensure if your .NET project is, if it's compatible with all the platforms like Mac OS, Linux, or Windows, you could very well do that as well. You can set up 3 different runners as a matrix strategy, and then you can run them on 3 different versions of operating systems, right? So that the possibilities are endless. This is a small demonstration of what or how you will set up a matrix build, right? So that's all I had for the library demo. So I hope it was pretty clear on the 2 things what we did now, right? So we started with the basic build CI build, and then we enhanced with the matrix strategy. Now let's see how we want to further enhance it by deploying this into deploying the web API into an Azure web app. So before that, let me quickly see if there are any questions. Are there any questions? I don't see. .NET in cloud, how to optimize the code for system performance? Okay, that's a good question. So, yeah, so optimization is a separate topic by itself, right? So you have something called .NET monitors, which you could use to understand the execution of your code, right? And also there are benchmark .NET and different other tools are available with which you can embed in your code, and then you can run the benchmark to figure out what is taking time. If you want to decide between 2 different algorithms or 2 different implementations, you can do a benchmarking, and then you can choose which one to use, and that's more often development time, right? If you want to optimize it further on the runtime, you need to do something a lot of profiling. You need to do the profiling and understand what kind of memory is getting created, what kind of memory is allocated, and are there any kind of memory leak issues, or are there any large objects getting created and which are not really garbage collected. There are a lot of things we need to look into it when you talk about performance. So it depends on all of these factors. So yeah, first thing is monitors. You need to have right monitors in place that should lead you to the right locations, it or the right segments in your code. Excuse me. So and then you should do further investigation, and then you have to improvise from there. Okay. And is this part of Microsoft Azure Bootcamp AZ104? I don't think it is not. I think that's been answered. Okay, so I don't see any other questions here. So I assume it is all good with respect to GitHub Actions. Okay, let's move on to our demo. So just quickly taking a stock of the demo scripts here, right? So we just understood environment variables, secrets part. I will let you know in a short while when we do the deployment. And we also did CA workflow for .NET application. We did a manual invocation workflow. We did a matrix strategy here, right? So now let's go ahead and get into the CD aspects of it. So for CD now, so for the CD, what we are going to do in the same repository, we have this web API demo. That is what we are going to, deploy it into an Azure App Service. So in the interest of time, what I did is I kind of created the Azure App Service already. So when I go here in my subscriptions, I have a lot of subscriptions here. So hopefully this should be the one. Yeah, so I have created a new resource group called RG DevCom, RG, sorry, AZ DevCom Dev. So I kind of have one resource group for dev and one for prod to simulate the development environment and production environment. So here is where I have my app service, which is app-az devcom-dev. And if you click on this, it should be simply up and running with the default one. There is nothing else deployed there. So you shouldn't be seeing anything coming up here. Hopefully this loads. Come on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so it's already available. It says your web app is running and waiting for your content, right? So then now we are going to set up CD to deploy the content to this, right? So to do that, there are a couple of ways you can do it. So one of the important thing is to let's do this. I'll go ahead and start from there. I'm going to download this publish profile from here first. So the easiest way is to download the publish profile, right? And then I'm going to open this publish profile and open with VS Code. Yeah, the profile is available with me. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and add this publish profile as a secret, okay, in our in our GitHub repository. So if you go to settings, you should see actions here, and within the general and runners, these are all about the actions permissions. One second, where are the secrets? Yeah, secrets is here. Sorry, secrets is under the security tab, right? You go to actions, and then you can create a new repository secret, right? I'll say a new repository secret, and then this is going to be my Azure Web App Publish profile. Maybe I'll use that name here, and I'm pasting that entire published profile here. So this is one of the easiest way to deploy anything into your Azure App Service. So we download the published profile and then we are saving it as a secret here. So I'm adding that secret here, right? So now you should see as a repository secret as Azure Web App published profile. So that means this is available as a secret for any workflow that is present within this particular repository. This is maintained at this repository level, right? So now let's go back to the actions, and maybe let's get a new workflow, and we can either extend from the previous one, or let's go ahead and choose some of this. There is already a ready-made workflow called deploy a .NET Core app to Azure Web App, right? So I'm going to give configure for that, and that has given me the predefined workflow for the entire thing, right? For this entire workflow basically, right? So let's explore this one by one, and then let's understand what are the different things given here, and then we'll take it from here, right? So yeah, so these are forget about these comments. This is for us to understand what are the things we need to change. So this is the name of the build, which is going to say build and deploy a .NET Core app into an Azure Web App, right? And then these are the environment variables, Azure Web App, and then the web app package, and then which .NET version, etc. So .NET version what we are using is 6.0.x. I'm going to mention that, and our path are also going to be different. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab things from existing ones so that we can quickly get this up and running. Yeah. So my Azure Web App name. Oops, where is this? Where did it go? Yeah, managing with multiple monitors. Sometimes it messes up the. Here. Okay, no, I was not here. It was in my GitHub Actions. Yes, right. Yeah. So environment variable Azure Web App name is where we have to give the web app what we created in the Azure portal here, right? So which is called app-azdev.com. Sorry, azdev.com-dev, right? Oops, sorry, not this. I'll go here. I'm going to give that as my app name, right? And then my Azure Web App package path is not needed. I'm going to use a different variable for that. So for now, I'm going to delete this. And then .NET version is fine. And then we're going to use a Web API project path. So which is nothing but my web API dash demo, right? I was trying to do a trial before that. That's why it's called a trial. So just to quickly check the path, I think it's called web API dash demo is the place where we have our web API project, right? And then I'm going to publish this web API into a location. So that is what this path is. Publishing is nothing but that's when you'll kind of put it in a release. You will build your particular project in a release configuration, and then that removes all of your debugging things, debugging related things, and then it will have only a trimmed down version of your application. That's what is a published one. So we need to publish that into a path. That path is called ./publish, right? And then again here on push of branches, again we also need to look at the branches here, and the path filter for now I'm going to ignore, and by default it came up with the workflow dispatch so that I can trigger it manually. And permissions part for now we can just ignore it. It's more for what are the different permissions it can do in this particular workflow. And again, same thing, jobs build, it's going to run on the Ubuntu latest, and these are the steps what it is going to do. So here, this is how we are using environment variable .NET version, which is set to 6.x here, right? Which is fine. So now what we are going to do now is these are the so basically this is a step to run your build faster, as it says cache, right? What it does is every time when the runner comes up, it's going to bring up a new runner, right? It's not guaranteed that the same runner is going to be used across multiple workflow runs. That means every time a new runner comes up, and it is going to set up the NuGet, it is going to set up the .NET version there, and it will try to download all the NuGet dependencies also into it, right? So to fast track some of these activities, to cache some of the NuGet packages, this is what is the step which is added here. And then again, we are trying to do a .NET build. We might need to add our path again here, right? Because we are not running it directly in this path, right? It says .NET ANV root, but what we are going to use is the web API project path. So web API project path / it's not my app here. So we have something called web API demo.csproj, right? And that is what we are going to use. This is my environment variable for web API project path from where in which location it is there. So I think I need to add the same thing. Okay, I think I made a small mistake here. They should go here. But this is my .NET build with the configuration release, and the project which we need to build is web API project path / web API demo.csproj. Right? And then this is the publish with the configuration release. Again, I'll give that, and the publish path is where I will use this. right? I'm gonna say here env dot publish path, right? So we are trying to publish this into this publish path. And then what we are also doing is, see if you can see here in this is like a multi job. The line number 38 is a build job. This is one of the step, sorry, one of the stage or one of a job inside this workflow, right? And also there is something called deploy job here, that is starting at line number 69, right? And what we need is we need to pass the artifacts from one job to another job now, right? That is why we have to upload this artifact into some location, right? And that is what this activity does, action slash upload artifact. With the name, I'm going to say the name as .NET Web API, and then the path of my this is environment dash publish path. This is the path from where it needs to get the artifact and then it needs to upload. Okay, so I'm going to give that publish path. And then what we will do is, this is a deploy job, it's another job. Like I said, since we need to run this deploy job only when the build job is complete, right? That's why we have put this needs build here. That means it's going to wait until the build job is complete and then this will get triggered. And here we are going to deploy this into an environment called development. So as of now we have not created the environment, so it's okay. So maybe I can also remove this, or it's fine, let it be there. And steps what we are going to do in this job is download. First step is we have to download the artifact, right? So we're downloading the artifact from the build job, and this is the download artifact. The name of the artifact what we gave here is .NET Web API, right? That is what I'm going to give here. And we need to also mention in which path we are going to download this. So I'm going to say path in this job is going to be in this dollar environment dot publish path. Right, so now what we are doing is we are trying to download this artifact which was uploaded in the previous job, and that is being copied into the publish path in this new run. See, because every job runs in different runner instances also. Okay, so that's why we have to do this one. Next is what we are going to deploy this into the Azure Web App, right? So for that is where we are using this Azure Web Apps deploy action, right? So wherever we are using an action, we'll say users Azure slash Web Apps deploy, right? And the app name where we want to deploy is Azure Web App name, right? And then the secret Azure underscore Web App publish profile is what we're using. I'm not sure if I gave the same name, so I might need to quickly double check that once. I'll go here and open my repository just to ensure it doesn't give any errors again, right? Where is my repositories? Okay, recent repositories. No, I don't want that. So devcom demo, and then we'll go to settings, secrets, actions, AZ. Okay, web underscore app. I have made it here. Okay. Yeah, so secrets dot Azure underscore web underscore app publish profile is the secret which we are using for the publish profile. And then the package is not going to come from this path, it's going to be coming from publish path. It's the location from where we are going to download the package, right? So I'm going to give that. And I think that should be good. So just to recap, we kind of given the right web app name where we want to deploy this, and which is the .NET version we want to deploy, and the project path where it needs to pull it, and the publish path where it needs to publish the the DLLs, and on which branch, etc., is what we have added further here, which is all good. We are setting up the .NET thing, and yeah, we have given the right path here, env.webapi. I think, did I do that? Yeah, I've closed it properly here. env.webapi project path, env.webapi project path, and webapi demo.cs branch. Okay, and we are publishing. Hopefully, yeah, this should work. Let's see. Let's go ahead and start the commit. Added, deploy to Azure workflow. All right, let's commit this and let's see if that runs. Now, if I go to action, you should see two actions because there are two workflows because we've added this new workflow. And if you click on this, you should see now we have these two things here, right, in the visualization. One is build and the next stage is deploy. And this deploy is not running because it's waiting for the build to complete, right? So we kind of did that. So let's say let this build and complete. and then we should see the app getting published, and we should be able to browse a web API from the Azure App Service. Okay, good. Build job is complete. So now if you go to summary, you should, yeah, okay, this is complete and this is running now. Yeah, deploying to development environment. Let's just give a couple more seconds. As you can see, this is how it is downloading it, and it is putting into this folder. So home runner, work, GH actions, and then AC devcom demo publish folder, right? And from that publish folder, it is trying to do a package deployment, a zip-based deployment into the Azure App Service. Yeah, I think deployment is complete, and it should be done here. So if you now go to the summary, you should see that. See here, you see the URL here, right? So how did that URL come? So you can also click on that URL to directly go to that app service. You might not see anything here, and I hope that this weather forecast, if I do, yeah, so there you go. You can see that web API responses are coming up here, right? If I do and refresh, it should give a different response. It keeps changing. That means our API is working fine. We were able to successfully set up an CI/CD pipeline to a dev environment, right? It's pretty good. So, and just to expand on how this is coming up here, I'll just quickly take a look at the uh, this core YAML file here. Uh, did you notice this particular URL here? Right, we say environment as development URL. It says steps dot deploy to web app dot outputs dot web app dash URL. Right. So what does mean in these steps we have an step called deploy to web app. This is a deploy to web app step that is having an output called web app URL. Right, that's available in this particular action. If you go into the GitHub Actions repository, we should be able to see that output. Right, that is what we are trying to map here. So this is how you would also use an output of one step in any other place if you want to. Okay. So with that, it is giving us that entire URL. So that's how we kind of did it for the dev environment, or a dev deployment is complete now, right? So far so good. I hope you all are able to follow me. Again, let me quickly check if there are any other questions. Okay, I don't see any other questions related to GitHub Actions. How are people architecting new solutions using .NET? That's an interesting question. Maybe I'll touch upon this after the next demo. Maybe once I complete the demo, we can discuss more on the .NET or the GitHub Action specific ones. Yeah, please hold on, Manoj. Okay, so moving on, and again on our demo checklist, just to check. I hope I'm doing good on time.
You're doing good on time. You still have 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Sure. Yeah. So then in that case, maybe I'll just quickly, I might need to rush through with the prod deployments, right? So what I was planning to show is like an production deployment or a folder, how we will create. Let me quickly do that here itself in this workflow. Let's edit this. So this could be like deploy to dev, or maybe I can also skip that in the interest of time. It takes some more time. So I can rename this as deploy to dev, and then I can create one more called deploy to prod. Okay. Basically, it could be pretty much the same thing I can copy, but only thing that would change is my published profile, right? I'm gonna say here as deploy to prod. Okay. And in here, the app service obviously will be different app service we'll have to use here, right? So what I did is I kind of created another resource group called rgacdevcom prod, and unfortunately I have did I not create the resource group? Yeah, okay. Looks like I didn't create the app service. Bad. App service web app. Let's see if I'm able to get this working. So app easy dev com prod is my prod Azure websites, and then I'm going to use a code here. The runtime stack is .NET 6 LTS. This is what I actually did it before the demo, just to save some time. It looks like I missed to create the prod environment. So never mind. So let's quickly get this created. In this prod resource group, I'm creating West Europe, and this is my app service plan. And I'll just say create. Let this get created, and then we can download the published profile, and then we can push it further. Submitting deployment. I hope this gets done soon. Deployment is in progress. Okay, as that happens, what we could do is I'm going to give the name here already because I. So what did I give? App dash az devcom dash prod is my the Azure Web App name. See, all these steps are going to be same. Here I'm going to say it's prod. The deployment is going to be to the production environment, right? And all these I'm going to leave the things. And here this one I will say I need deploy to dev as my dependency. Okay. So whenever dev deployment is complete, this one I want to move into prod. Of course, you might have multiple stages in between dev to QA and then QA to pre-prod and then pre-prod to prod or whatever be other environments. But since the demo sake, I'm just mimicking this way, right? I'm changing this as my deploy to dev, and then all these remains the same. I'm going to download the same artifact, and I'm going to push it here. Hopefully, that should be ready by now. Yes, it is complete. It's a good resource. And the same thing. So what we will do now is we'll also get this published profile again, right? But this time we are not going to save it into as a repository level. We are going to do is we're going to push it into the environment level, right? So how to do that? So let's go back to our GitHub repository. Let's go to settings here. So here you can see something called environments, right? There's only one environment called development environment, which got created with that particular previous workflow. I'm going to create an environment called prod now, okay, and then say configure environment. And see, here is where we can set up all the protection rules. Like we can say this always needs approval from me, right? Whenever there's a prod deployment is needed, I need to always provide an approval. And I can also specify timer, like say how long I want to wait before I start the deployment. Maybe I'll just say 1 minute here just for the demo sake, and I can do the protection rules. And I can also specify from which branch I want to deploy, right? I don't want to deploy from all branches. So I can go ahead and say protected branches. So there's nothing available. So selected branches I will choose here. And I'm going to say it's a master branch. So only from master branch I would want to deploy this into my production environment. So I'm going to do that. And as you can see, also something called environment secrets, right? So here is where I'm going to add my Azure Web App profile. Okay, and maybe just for uh, to avoid the conflicts in the name, I'm going to do this, and I'm adding that published profile here, and say add secret. Right. So now, if you try to use this environment secrets in any other stage, it will not work. It's going to error out telling you this is available only for environment production. Right. So I hope the name I gave as production or prod. What did I give? It's called prod, right? So I need to give the same name here called prod, and here the secret would be this one, Azure Web App Published Profile prod. Okay, that's the only change we would need to do to introduce a new section. Hopefully this should work. Let's see, added prod stage. Commit changes. Once we commit, they should start deploying it. Rather, the workflow should start running. Yeah, so now if you go and look at the workflow, you should see 3 stages, right? So it will complete this, and then it will do this, and then it will wait for 1 minute, and then it also waits for my approval, and then it will go ahead and do a prod deployment. Okay, so as that happens, maybe I'll also quickly show one other thing, one other cool thing around the static web apps, right? So far what we've been seeing is a basic Docker library and then a web API, right? And we've also been creating these workflows from the code. Right now we can see how we can also do it from the Azure portal itself directly. Okay, so for that I am going to go to the portal and let's see dev prod. I want to go to the dev. Okay, let's go ahead and create something called static web apps. Okay, static web apps is another offering in Azure that you could use to basically host the static content. Let's say if you have like an static content based on whatever any JavaScript framework or based on Blazor, etc. Right, that doesn't need any kind of server side rendering, which can run, which will have basically plain old excuse me, plain old JavaScript, CSS, HTML, or it can have Blazor content. That's what you will host it in a static web app. It also has a lot of other goodness in it. I'm not going to go get into the details of that now. So st app and then say az devcom demo is my static web app. It's for free, and then I'm going to say West Europe is where I'm going to use it. So here you can directly choose GitHub, and then you can set up the workflow from here itself directly. I've already authorized my account, so it's showing my SV Swaminathan with my GitHub account, and the organization I'm going to choose as SV Swaminathan, and the repository is GS Actions AZ devcom demo. Right? And in this repository, the branch I'm going to give is master branch, and the build details, build presets. Here is where you can choose what is your static content, what you're going to deploy now. Is it based on these JavaScript frameworks, Angular, Next, Nuxt, React, Svelte, Vue, or it is based on the Blazor, or it's based on static site generators, Hugo, Gatsby, VuePress, everything you can use. In our demo, it's going to be on Blazor, so I'm going to use Blazor. And the location of the folder location is Blazor demo, so I'm going to do that. And I don't have any API backend for my application, so I'm going to leave that blank. And the output is www root. So let me quickly double check once my folder location alone to see if it's the right one. So Blazor dash demo is the one. So yeah, I've done that. I'm going to create this. So now what this does is it will create a static web app, and then it will also create an GitHub Actions workflow for you, and it will commit into this repository. Okay, and once that is done, the workflow will automatically run, and it will automatically deploy your static content as well into the web app. Okay, so as that happens, let me quickly switch gears, and then let's go back to the previous broad deployment. See, as you can see, dev is complete, and then it says it's requested review to prod, right? Since it's the demo, I'm giving myself as a reviewer, and I'm going to approve it myself. But in the real case, you obviously will give some release approvers as an, reviewer, right? So I'm going to review deployment. I'll say looks good to me. Let's push to prod, right? So I'm gonna say approve and deploy. And once it is done, say it says status waiting, because what we've done is we said it will wait for a minute to run it. The reason for this minute waiting is for, let's say if you want to run some sort of an automation test or anything to deploy, right? You will wait for the time, and then it will it will then get executed. So these are deployment reviews and the comments and everything, right? So now once the deployment is complete, we should see a similar one, and then we should be able to browse that prod workflow as well. Okay. Now, meanwhile, let's see if the static web apps is complete. Yeah, this is complete. Let's say go to resource. It said we've not received it. So now let's go back to our GitHub Actions. If you go here in the actions, see there's one more thing added now. It's Azure Static Web App CI/CD. Right? This is automatically created by Azure directly. So we didn't write anything out by ourselves, right? So this created this entire workflow. We'll go and explore that workflow file as well. But this is one of the easiest way to get your static content up and running in Azure Static Web Apps with GitHub Actions. So let's say if you're running maybe conferences, and if you want to run events, and then if you want to create event websites and things like that, then this will be a lot helpful. So you can quickly create your static app and then use GitHub Actions and then push it into static web apps. And once you're on static web apps, you can add your custom domain, and then all your SSL and all other things also you can be done on top of that. Yeah, so as this comes, let me quickly switch gears. I know I'm switching a lot, just in the interest of time, I'm trying to show as much as possible. So if I go back here to the added prod stage, so this is my prod website, right? So it should be the same code that is deployed in my dev is what is deployed into prod as well. And it should, when we hit that endpoint, it should show us the same web API response. Okay, this is run. And I'm going to say weather forecast. There we go. Right, so as you can see, the responses are coming up. So we were able to set up an CI and CD pipeline, deploy into dev, and then we put environment protections and then environment related checks and balances. And then we also enable the deployment into production. Right, that's how we can take our code to CI/CD via CI/CD into cloud in a much faster way. And I hope the static web apps also should be complete by now. Yeah, that's also done. And this should have pushed into, where is my URL, static web apps URL? Yeah, I think it created. Yeah, okay, LS2 this one. Yeah, so this is the random URL it created for us, .azureStaticApps.net, and this is the same Blazor app which we saw in the beginning, right? So we were able to also set up an CI/CD pipeline for that, and then we deployed into Azure. Right? So that's how you can basically create multiple types of pipelines, and then you can go ahead and create push them into Azure using GitHub Actions. So I also have other repositories in my GitHub where you can go and check out the other workloads if you want to look at the functions. Right, I have one for GH Actions demo, so that has a workflow for an deployment of Azure functions. Right, it's pretty much on the same line. So you will use something called a function action to basically deploy that. right? Or if you want to also, if you're interested in learning about containers, and if you want to do that, even that is also there. I hope it's called Web App for Containers or Actions. AKS demo. Yeah, if you want to deploy into AKS, you can go ahead and look at that. That repo has that example, and I believe, yeah, this is our basis server GitHub Actions demo. Yeah, so basically, yeah, there are multiple workflows available. You can go and look at each one, and then you can understand the different ones as well. This is also unpublished profile based on one. Or you can also take a look at some of the videos which I have already put. So basically, you can go to maybe YouTube and then search for GitHub Actions plus Swaminathan Vetri. You can see these Azure App Service or self-hosted runners, or deploying into AKS and deploying into Web App for containers, and multiple other content are already out there as well. Well, that's pretty much what I had. Let me check the demo. This one
Sure.
scripts to see if everything is covered. Oops, wrong one.
Yeah, no dual monitor. That's the problem.
Yeah, so pull request based conditions is what I think I kind of missed that. But setting environments and branch protections we set up the deployment to prod, created prod infra, set up published preference environment secrets, and then we did deployment with approvals. So this is also good. And then yeah, code changes I couldn't do it, but I think you get the idea now. It will work whenever we make the code changes, right? And then we
Mm.
also did the setting up of Blazor Wasm. Yeah, so two three things I couldn't show, I think, in the lack of time. But yeah, you get the idea. I hope you have got the idea on how easy it is to set up actions, and then how we can easily do the deployments into Azure using GitHub Actions. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think we had some questions to be answered because folks were
Hmm.
so eager to learn something. I think you have
Okay.
something to be shared. Yeah, questions. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yes.
just a single slider, nothing else there. So about the
Sure,
questions,
sure.
let me take a look at the questions here now. Okay.
So I think somebody asked with respect to the Node.js. I think Shreya.
Okay. Why Node.js is single threaded is a very tricky question actually. See, typically JavaScript itself is an single threaded environment, right? You don't have like
Mm.
an concept of multi-threaded there. The way it runs, the kind of execution environment, right? It is single threaded. The basic JavaScript engine that executes your entire thing is kind of single threaded. That's why, since it's built on that particular engine, you can't really have an option for multi-threaded. That's when we talk about .NET, which runs on something like in CLR, right? That is kind of, and the .NET runtime can run multiple threads. That's why you can build multi-threaded applications or asynchronous applications with .NET or any other programming languages. Like even Java, for that matter, if you take an example of JVM, then JVM is capable of running multiple threads. Right? It's all around the process which runs, and then the runtime, what it runs and what its capability. Depending on that, only the upper layers they can leverage them, right? They can't really do
Yeah.
beyond their runtime's capabilities. That's how it
Yeah.
is.
And even if you think of the kernel which it runs on, like
Hmm.
.NET is built for Windows. That's what we always think, but it's also runs absolutely good on Linux. But you need to
Yeah.
strategize it properly in such a way that you understand, okay, this is what I require from my Windows kernel. This is what I
Yeah.
require from my entire thing. Oh yeah, I think DevOps
Yes.
my favorite questions. How and when to start with DevOps?
Okay, that's a very good question. So when is much easier? You need to start as soon as possible, or whenever you're starting a new project, it's good to get into the DevOps practices, right? But first thing, you need to define what are the different practices you want to use from DevOps, right? Because DevOps is also an overly used word in this current world and current ecosystem, right? So define what are things you want to do, and you can't do everything at once or at the first step itself, right? So take phased approaches. The one of the important things, or the basic one you need to do, is definitely CI/CD pipeline. You can't really tell you are doing any DevOps without having a CI/CD pipeline in place, right? So first thing is, yes, get your CI/CD pipelines run for your code, and then if you're possible, get into infrastructure automation as well, so that you can also run your infrastructure creation using automated pipelines, and then running all your tests, functional tests, your end-to-end tests, all the tests also you need to run using your in an automated fashion. So basically, end-to-end should be automated, right? The moment developer checks in a code, you need to have different strategies for your branches, right? No, you don't want to deploy everything to production or everything in environment, right? You might need to come up with a branching strategy. So define what branch needs to go into which environment, how do your feature branch should work, how would your development branch should work, how would your master branches should work, right? Define all of those strategies, and then define the CI pipelines around that, and then set up the CD pipelines around that, and that's not the end of it. Right? This is only around pushing into prod. But what happens after you push into the prod? That's where the monitoring comes into picture. So you also need to worry about or think about what are the different monitoring tools you can use. How do you identify whether your application is up and running all the time or not? How do you identify if there's a crash that happened? How do you identify what kind of exceptions is happening in your application when it is running? Right? You also need to put some brain around the observability part of it, right? So there are all of these things. When you do is when you can tell that you are following something like a DevOps model, right? And also it shouldn't be anything. Nothing should be. I know it's a very ambitious statement to make that nothing should be a manual, but yeah, that is what we need to aim for, so that we can minimize the manual footprints in your entire, software deployment life cycle, or in your entire supply chain of your software development, right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
what is
true.
how and when. Like I said, as soon as you're starting new, that's the best place to start with. Or if you're already having a project, then like identify these intermittent areas and set up CI/CD pipelines if it's not there, and then start setting up your test automation if it's not there, and then start setting up infrastructure automation, then start setting up your monitoring, so you can take these phases and then you can cover the entire breadth.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Srinivas, this is not part of AC 104. We talk DevOps. We talk DevOps, but this is not part of AC 104. It's very, very different from what we are talking here.
Yeah.
And I think Shreya again has asked .NET in cloud, how to optimize the code for the system performance.
Yeah, I think I touched upon this sometime back, right? Before, in between the demos as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, see, it's all about understanding the monitors and the things like that. There is something called .NET Monitor if you're using .NET Core. If you're using like .NET Framework, I think you're specifically asking about .NET in cloud. So I assume it's more on the .NET Core and then utilizing the containerized models and things like that, right? So put the monitors in place and then understand what kind of metrics it is coming out, right? What are the number of threads that are getting created? What is your memory and what is your CPU count and things like that when your application runs, right? And then you can start digging into which portion is taking more time to execute, and then look at why it is taking time to execute. Is it a compute intensive operation? Are you doing it in the main thread, or do you want to make if there's a way to make it parallelized, can you do the parallelism there? And even over parallelism is also an anti-pattern, right? You cannot simply parallelize everything. You also need to be mindful of the fact what amount of parallelism you can do by understanding the machine or the cores in which it is in your application is running, right? So the performance tuning is a big topic by itself, right? So first thing is, yes, put monitors and then start understanding the monitors, the data coming out of the monitors, and then start refining the things in your application, right? Another thing which I also called out is on the benchmark.net. That's one of the important one of the very useful tool which you can use during the development phase itself to understand how your code is going to execute and how long it is going to take. Whether if you use, for example, span, how much is your memory print it is going to have, or over if you use something like a string or a list and whatever, right? And how much is the memory allocation it's going to have. So you can get all those details and then you can see which one you would use to optimize some of your method executions, etc.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hope that
that's,
clarified at a high level. Yeah.
yeah. I think, yeah, I think Manoj has asked about how people are architecting new solutions using .NET. Like, solutions.
I mean, that's a very vague question, but yeah, I understand if your intent is to understand how .NET applications are being architected, like I showed in the beginning, like .NET slash architecture is a good architecture guide you have. Like there are different types of applications. Right? If you talk about Blazor, that comes with a different style of architecture. If you talk about an web API, that comes with a different style of architecture. Or if you talk about microservices, that has its own different patterns, design patterns, and things like that, right? So it really depends on what kind of application we are looking at. Assuming with microservices, there is a good amount of microservices patterns available, like be it claims check pattern, bulkhead pattern, and circuit breakers, and multiple other patterns are there. We need to see what fits the bill in our use case, and then we can go ahead and utilize them. It could be
Yeah,
communication. The inter microservice communication has a multiple patterns by itself. It could be asynchronous HTTP based communications, or it could be asynchronous via messaging, or it could be asynchronous via events. There are n number of options available. So depending on the use case and what problem we're trying to solve, we need to pick the right one and then put them into the action.
yeah. I think read a book called Gang of Four. That actually talks in terms of the software aspect. It doesn't cover anything on cloud or anything. But
Correct. Yeah.
when you think about something like, can I really think before I deploy? Think before I act on to any of the
Yeah.
system design or anything. I think probably reading a book like Gang of Four would be an
Yeah.
amazing start. Like I
Yeah.
always recommend that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. See, if you talk about, like, I went at a higher level about microservices and things like that. When you talk about individual microservice, how would you design that particular microservice? That's where you will use all these patterns defined in the Gang of for it, like what kind of structural pattern you would use, or what kind of behavioral pattern you are going to use, and things like that, right? So it's a combination of all of these. When you talk about high level architecture, you need to understand what are the different means of communication, different observability patterns, different infrastructures I will use, and things like that. And then when you get to the next level, you can also understand what are security patterns I need to use. How do I ensure there's zero trust, right? Zero trust architecture is one other thing. So there are n number of things we need to consider when you talk about the solution architecture. And that's exactly what I do. That's why I'm kind of throwing all of these jargons now. That's my day-to-day job.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it's not the end. Okay, we don't
Yeah.
know what is beyond serverless. There
Yes.
might be something new which is coming up.
Yes, and
Like,
that's another thing, right? When you talk about cloud architecture, whether you want to go with IaaS or PaaS or SaaS or FaaS or CaaS, there are a number of things. Do you want to use containers, or do you want to go with pure serverless, or are you okay with an PaaS model, which is a platform as a service, or if you want to get full control, do you want to go with IaaS? So it also depends on multiple other factors. So yeah, it all boils down to what is our context and what kind of constraints also we have, and what kind of budget we have, and a lot of other things as well,
yeah,
right?
I think when you think of VMs are not absolute. Like, they, what do you see in the AKS? Behind AKS, it's still VMs which are working
Yeah.
back there. What do you think in terms of any of the services that you think it's still VM back there? Like,
Yeah.
even in web app, it's still VM back there, but ASP.NET wala package karke and everything has been
Yes.
stacked onto it.
It's all about
It's a platform.
abstractions.
It's
What
just
level of
abstract.
abstraction you want, right? You want full control,
Yeah,
you have to go with IaaS. You don't want to know about what is there, go with serverless completely. If you want to know at least the runtime where it is running, then PaaS is like a middle ground for you.
yeah. I think
Right.
Azure is great. Azure has amazing PaaS services. I
Yeah.
think I think
Yes.
this is the end of it. We are not ending any of the series on .NET. We are really
Mhm.
coming back up with it. We are as much as we are trying as much as we can to
Mhm.
get people like Swami, people like Niloshima, and everybody like in the row. We just want to
Mhm.
get as many people in the .NET fraternity so that you guys get to learn what is this .NET all about. And I think thank
Yeah.
you so much, Swami sir, for being on the
Mhm.
show, explaining us what is GitHub Actions. I think some of the
Mhm.
things what you told is something that I'll go look back and I do
Yes.
again a session on GitHub Actions or something somewhere else. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Definitely.
I've been following all his content. So I think follow his YouTube channel. It does everything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you for hosting me, Vishwas. I hope you guys learned something new. And I think I've shared all my contacts. So yeah, I'm out there. So just go search for Swaminathan Vetri, and then you should be able to find me. And then
Yeah.
yeah, follow me. And then if you have any further questions on GitHub Actions or .NET specific, also we can do it. Or if in case you want to go deep dive into like gRPC is one of the coolest things in .NET, right?
Yeah.
We can also do such deep dive sessions as well. So I thought it's more on the Devops, and then GitHub Actions and .NET is another important aspect. So we kind of covered that. So let me know, Vishwas, what does the community need? We can definitely do more sessions on any specific topics as well. I'll always
Sure.
be happy to share the learnings with the community.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
All
Folks, we're
right.
ending the broadcast because it's already a time for us to go on and have a tea, coffee, which we missed or anything. So let's just go have it. And thank you so much, folks. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.